you mic rights when we get to that section of the presentation or the web session. Behind the mics today, you have me, Jessica. I am the host of the xAPI Cohort. We have Megan here today, who's going to help moderate the panel and conversation. We also have Aaron and Jamie, our producers behind the screens, to help with any tech issues that you might have or any questions you might have. So we are in week 9, which means that we're moving into the final leg of cohort. And in the next few weeks, we'll actually start doing project team demos. So you'll see on that schedule November 12th and November 19th, start project team demos. Please start thinking about when you would like your team to present your demos, or if you would like your team to present a demo. Again, nothing has to be perfect to present your demo. You can start where you are and show where you are and get lots of feedback and continue to develop. And then you can present again at the party in December, and we'll talk a little bit about how to sign up for that later at the end of the session. But start thinking about what date might work best for a demonstration. Next week, we have Wendy Morgan coming to present some case studies, and today we're going to talk about data standards across the workforce experience. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Megan, who's going to share a little more about today's conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jess. And hello, everybody who is live and watching us on the recording. We're going to do something different. And this is the first time in cohort in which we have talked about something that's not actually xAPI. So it's a really interesting space for us. And I think it's a really important space for all of us as learning experience designers, as learning engineers, to really be aware of what's going on in the space around us, right? So the concept for this session actually happened back in August this summer when Jessica and I were presenting at the ADL iFest conference. We had a pre-recorded session, and then Jason Tyszko he moderated a section that I was involved with. And I realized as he was describing the work he's doing that totally overlaps with what we're doing here. And there's a lot of connections. And, sometimes, yes, I like to talk about having xAPI allows us to do some extreme navel gazing about the learning experience. It also allows us to look outward at the impact of learning on the performance experience and use that to make better decisions about learning. But I'll be honest, if it wasn't in the learning and performance space, I really didn't pay much attention to it. And that's really where, as I was sitting there and I'm trying to make coherent thoughts coming out of my head while I'm listening to Jason, I'm thinking, wow, there's a much bigger world out here, and I need to make sure everybody is aware of that. Very shortly on the heels of that, Brian Duck actually is a member of the cohort and has been for a few years, introduced me to the HR Open Assessments or HR Open Standards Assessment subgroup. And I met up with Kim and I thought, oh my gosh, yes, if we can't be talking right, and interoperability and shared data specs unless we're actually looking across the entire employee experience. So Jason and Kim, what I'm going to have each of them do, so everybody knows where we're going today, is share a little bit about their work and introduce that, and then we'll come back and we'll have kind of a panel discussion. Because at this point, so Jason and Kim, just so you're aware, at this point in the xAPI learning cohort, the people here are familiar enough with xAPI that they are working on prototype projects. They are sending data, they are receiving data, and we are well into and almost to the point where we're ready to reveal projects. And I love the project-based focus. But aside from the HR Open Cohort project team that Jim Elder is going to be sharing the update on later on today, most of us in the cohort are maybe not aware, like I wasn't, of anything else that's going on. So let's see, Jess, where are we starting in, who's going first? Which we actually didn't talk to Kim or Jason about.
Kim, you're going first.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is Jason going first?
Yeah, I think we had Jason going first.
Okay, Jason's going first. Okay, go for it, Jason.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan, for having the chamber here today. It's a pleasure to be part of this cohort experience, and I'm going to keep my comments relatively brief and hopefully just share a little bit of background information about what we've been up to at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and also the T3 Innovation Network, which is an initiative of the Chamber Foundation. And hopefully I'll tee up Kim and then we can make this more of a discussion. But I wanted to share a little bit about my organization. The U.S. Chamber is the world's largest business and lobbying organization. We represent over 1,500 state and federal, or state and local chambers of commerce, as well as a corporate membership of over 400,000 companies. Collectively, our federation represents over 3 million businesses. I'm here today representing the foundation side of the house, which is our 501c3 nonprofit, which is not membership driven, but is philanthropically driven. And whereas the U.S. Chamber is kind of the business voice that is hill facing, the foundation is the business voice that is field facing. So we spend a lot of time with our partners in the field trying to solve a wide variety of education and workforce challenges, with our role primarily being to elevate the employer leadership role and to address what needs to be done on the employer side in a lot of these challenges. So we have a pretty robust workforce portfolio, but one of the initiatives that I wanted to highlight for you all today is our T3 Innovation Network. And the T3 Innovation Network, the T stands for talent, the 3 for Web 3.0. But this was an initiative that got kicked off about 2.5 years ago. And it was because the U.S. Chamber was developing what we call the Job Data Exchange, JDX, which is a data standard for job descriptions and postings, the JDX Job Schema Plus. And the reason we embarked on that effort was to improve employer signaling in the talent marketplace, because we realized that if we're not creating structured data about in-demand jobs, skills, credentials, and the like, we're not able to signal effectively out to all the education and training providers who are trying to align with business demand. And we see that there's a lot of deficiencies with the existing labor market information tools. So we essentially want to create the first ever organic labor market information system direct from employers, which is particularly valuable in an unstructured labor market like we have in the United States. So that's where we started, but we realized that even if we start solving for employer signaling and start sending better structured signals from our HR systems, we still need to sync our signals with everybody else. So we convened the T3 Innovation Network as a conversation around data interoperability throughout the talent marketplace. And we had the employers, the education and training providers, government and other stakeholders like the military at the table, but also the technology vendors that serve them. So for the employers, we had the the companies, but we also had the HR vendors and applicant tracking system vendors. We had the colleges and universities, but we also had those that operate student information systems and learning management systems, and of course the military side of the house. And we started talking about how we're able to exchange data seamlessly and reduce friction, so we can promote a more streamlined talent marketplace where companies can find the talent that need people, individual learners and workers could better identify continuing education and career opportunities and seamlessly transition into them, and remove friction wherever we can. So we launched this conversation, and within 6 months' time, we created a blueprint for how we can kind of build the data and technology infrastructure of the future for the talent marketplace. And the last couple of years, probably about a year and 9 months now, we've been implementing that roadmap. And in that time, we've grown the network to now over 500 public and private organizations, nearly 1,000 professionals that make up the network. It's free, no obligation to join. You just opt in. About a quarter of our membership is international. And there's kind of 3 big goals. There's 8 projects. There's a lot of different activities, but when it all comes down to it, there's been 3 big goals. The first is to build the data and technology infrastructure to make all learning count and to render that learning as data, and as such, data that is transactional across different IT systems and platforms. Number 2, to make sure competencies and skills become the new currency of the talent marketplace. And to be currency means that it needs to be data that is also transactional, but also translatable across domains. And we also want to make sure that we are leveraging this new data infrastructure, new technologies to empower learners and workers with their data, because they often are on the losing end of the asymmetry, where everyone has a lot of data about you, but you don't know who they are or how to access it or how to make it work for you. we're trying to flip that to say people should have access to more data. It should empower them and give them agency so they can pursue continuing education and employment opportunities. So 3 big goals, and what we believe is there won't be a single technology stack to rule them all. That the future is going to be decentralized, distributed data infrastructure that's both public and private. So how are we working to get the right enabling infrastructure in place to allow the seamless sharing of data in ways that address end user use cases? So the problems employers are trying to solve, colleges are trying to solve, the military is trying to solve. So we set out and we said, let's define the use cases. And if interoperability is the name of the game, we want to make sure everything we do is standards-based. And when I say standards-based, I mean data standards-based, because data standards are the key to unlocking that interoperability. And we also want to make sure we're vendor neutral. This needs to be an open and fair data infrastructure where we're not picking winners or losers or giving anyone competitive advantage, but trying to create in the T3 space opportunities for collective action where what comes out of it is a set of data standards and tools that can be equally accessed by all. And the other thing that really stands out in T3 is we want to make sure that everything we do is open and transparent, that ethics are a part of all the projects we do, because we know technology is a tool and it could be used for good, it could be used for harm, it could be used and intended one way and have all kinds of unintended consequences. So we want to make sure in T3 we are laser focused on the ethics around the technologies we are pursuing, but then also that we are always looking with an eye towards equity. That if we are going to accelerate the digital transformation of the talent marketplace, we must do so in a way that is actually promoting more diversity, equity, and inclusion at all times. I included here on this slide a link to the T3 Innovation Network if you want to learn more about all the work that's been happening over these many years. But also want to point out one of our latest offerings, which I believe is the reason Megan invited us here today, which is our Ler Resource Hub. So one of the key things, so we have a lot of different projects around data standards mapping and harmonization. We have projects around public sector adoption of data standards, projects around the competency and skill data infrastructure that's beginning to form around the world. And we also have a number of projects around public-private data collaboratives and digital identity. All very wonky, but when you roll them up, the vast majority of the projects we've engaged on are building the enabling data infrastructure to make learning and employment records possible, LERs. And what is an LER? Think of it as a universal transcript. Some call it a comprehensive learner record. It used to be referred to as an interoperable learner record. The idea is a transcript that is digital, that reflects the learning you've attained in a particular setting, that is linked to you as an individual, and you can combine multiple records like transcripts in order to provide a more comprehensive view of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have and the credentials you've earned that you could then use to apply for education or employment opportunities, or to use to inform with various algorithms potential career pathways that may be available to you and to assess your skills gaps. So we think this is the digital infrastructure of the future. And in T3, we wanted to create a space called the Ler Resource Hub where emerging Ler pilots can come and learn together. So we just launched it this year. And the Ler Resource Hub has access to open data resources and standards that have been mapped and harmonized in this space. It's going to continue to have more access to competency and skill data that could be used to populate them, to new employment earnings records, because it's not just about the learning, it's also about earnings history as well as employment history, and other tools around self-sovereignty or digital identity that can be integrated into an Ler pilot. So we built this hub and we hired an Ler community manager. His name's Phil Long. Some of you may have heard of him. And we've now aggregated nearly 24 Ler pilots within that community group. And they're all sharing best practices, identifying common challenges around interoperability. And we're learning together as we go as we try to build this global data infrastructure. We've already built inroads with the European Commission and others, and we're hoping to continue to expand the Ler Resource Hub to become the go-to place to get your pilot featured, but also to meet your peers to talk about the challenges around promoting the interoperability we all seek. I just wanted to share with you a few quick slides to point out a specific technology that Kim and I thought would be helpful to you all. If we could go to the next slide, I wanted to just make one point about the complexity of this challenge. There's a couple ways you can actually transport one of these LERs. And you may see the term ILR pop up in here. It's the old term. It means LER. It's the same thing. But one is B2B transfer. So if I could generate a learning and employment record in, for example, a college, and I can transfer that over to another college or to an employer, I can go system to system and transfer that record. It's no easy thing, but it's a lot easier than the next challenge, which comes up on the next slide, which is not everything's going to be B2B. But if we're all about empowering learners and workers, we need to make sure we're attaching the record to the individual, and the individual could then exercise choice over who they send that record to when they want to do it. So who sees what when. So empowering and providing agency. So now imagine that college is providing a learning and employment record that is now being attached to an individual, a graduate, and they are going to include it with their high school transcript and other records that they've attained over time, but now it's going inside what we call a digital wallet. So a digital wallet, so when we say universal transcript, don't think there's one to rule them all. It's multiple records that could be combined in something like a digital wallet or passport that could then become disaggregated depending on who you want to share what data with. So here's an individual that gets that transcript and who's able to take that transcript out and send it to an employer to verify their education history as they seek that employment opportunity. So two different ways of transporting an LER, one B2B, the other one is an organization to an individual, and then the individual to another organization. And if we show the next slide, this will be my last one. Again, just reiterating this concept that when we say a learning and employment record, there can be multiple records attached to a single individual. And the key thing we emphasize in T3 is we need to make sure that payload, that LER payload, is standards-based. If it's standards-based, it could be incorporated into a digital wallet and shared across IT systems. And that's the key to making sure that the records that are exchanged are machine actional and computational. That will allow the flow of data across HR systems, ATS systems, SIS systems, LMS systems, so on and so forth. But this is the future we're aspiring to, is to be able to generate these records of learning to make sure that they are highlighting the competencies and skills someone has, and for anyone to issue one to an individual, but for that individual to aggregate them in a digital wallet tool, and will allow them to share them out depending on what their objectives are as an individual. I did have one more slide, but I'm going to say that in case certain questions come up, because it gets into the complexity of the payload and the wrapper and what are the data specifications that should be included. But hopefully this gave you at least a little bit of an entree into what the T3 Innovation Network has been up to these last couple of years. And hopefully we could tease out how some of the work that we've done around data standards and with the data standards community, specific to the learning and employment record community, how that might apply to the challenges you all are pursuing. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Kim. I want to point out, just to be transparent, that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is a member of HR Open Standards Consortium, and HR Open has been a real value-added member of the T3 Innovation Network, not only in their working with the Chamber to maintain and promote adoption and use of the Job Data Exchange and the data standard therein, but also to begin the work of mapping HR standards with the education and workforce community, namely standards bodies like PESC and IMS Global, IEEE, and others, because this employment side is so critical and it's often been the missing piece. And the Chamber and HR Open are now trying to join forces and work together to make sure the employer side of all this and the HR side are connecting to the education side in a way to promote data interoperability. So I probably went too long there. I'm going to stop, pass the torch over to Kim.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. So just very quickly, HR Open is basically we're a nonprofit organization. And the whole point is to have, and we talked, Jason had talked a little bit about that, non-vendor specific, and that's what we are. We let everyone, anyone can join, anyone can participate, and we want to have everyone helping develop what those standards are so that they meet their needs and what their requirements are. So that's really this slide here. So we can go to the next one. All right, so this is really the scope, and as Jason has mentioned, and Megan also, HR is all-encompassing. It just touches on so many different things. For example, if you look at the kind of the right hand, most of the top part is what really is involved in this group. So if you think about the job board and the applicant tracking systems and onboarding, that's all part of that JDX piece that Jason had mentioned. It has to do with job boards, getting job data exchange, getting people back to work more quickly is a lot of what the T3 has been focusing on. And so we've been working with them on that. So that's kind of that left-hand upper corner. And the other part of it we wanted to talk about is the right-hand corner up on top. So that assessments and the talent management. So anything that, you might do an assessment, and I know that that Jim Elder's been working with some of the people in the group about assessments, and so we'll talk just briefly on that. But the whole point is taking this information that you have. So you've got a resume, or you have the information on your resume, like your employment information and your education information. All of that can go into that diagram that Jason put up there that shows, here's the that wrapper. We didn't talk so much about the wrapper as much, but the wallet, and here's the education piece you might have. Here's the employment piece you might have. Here might be any assessments that you've taken, and then you have the competencies on top of that. So all of those things fit into competencies. Your education and your experience and the assessments can fit right into the competencies, and that's what people are going to be needing and using to determine whether it's the right job fit. Yep, thank you. Those are the different ones. Okay, so just very quickly with the assessments, I know Jim had been working with you guys on some of this, and so I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what we do. So just one piece of that whole puzzle that we were just looking at is the assessments. And we have the subject, the catalog, order, and report. And we did just finish this multi-part orders and staging use cases. And I know that he's working right now with the the cohort. So that group meets on Fridays if you guys are interested. And also, if you're interested in looking at any of the standards, they're free. You're welcome to download those and look at those. Any of them, not just assessments. So if you're in any of those different areas. I think that's it for this one. I told you I was going to go through quickly. So this is just kind of a smattering of what is available. What do we deliver? So we do it in JSON and XSD. So you're going to have different schemas and samples. The use cases are really, really big. We've got documentation on that. We have diagrams. We might have some lists. We have who the actors are, and then supported processes. So this just gives you an idea of, those calls when we meet weekly. This is what we're working on. This is what everyone helps to develop. And I think by having that broad group of different people, it really helps make sure that we are getting what we need for the industry. Next, I think that's really the only other thing here is just that assessment and recruiting group. I think I want to really go back to the slide that Jason was showing kind of for any questions, but if you guys want to download the standards, you can do that. And if you want to get involved with the work that Jim's doing, that would be assessments, or more of the work that we're doing with recruiting, which is going to have to do with that xAPI piece that we're doing, having to do with the worker record. So that was it. I told you I'd be very quick. That one you just showed, the last, yep, that one I think is probably going to be the most useful. So you can see here that top letter, that top page is really where HR Open fits in. We do have some competencies in that, but really we focus on what's your background? What education and employment have you had? We don't do transcripts. It's more just general with the education, but definitely your background. Where have you worked? Do you have a degree? Anything that you would typically see on a CV or a resume would be in there.
And Kim, if I could just add one thing, because I think this is, you bridged this nicely. I was trying to rush through too fast, but those records you see, each of those could be based upon a different data standard. But if they use what Kim was referring to is a wrapper for the LER that essentially says it's data about the data, it's kind of the metadata layer, but it tells you what's inside that payload, regardless of the standard, you'll be allowed to integrate that into a wallet application. And if you show the final slide, the one with the big yellow background, this kind of shows you the various data elements where in that the bottom half or the majority of it is the payload. That's the record itself and the kinds of data that's contained therein. But the wrapper is the data about the payload. And we've developed in T3 a open data specification for a wrapper that could be used in any LER pilot and for any technology that wants to pursue it, because we want to be vendor neutral, and we're not saying there's a specific way to do it. We're just saying if you follow this specification, it increases the chances that your record, based upon a data standard, can be integrated into a wallet and can be interoperable with other systems. But I probably said that very unartfully. I do not actually have a data standards or technology background myself. I just play one on TV. But Kim, if you want to further add to that that description, I encourage you to get the facts straight.
Well, I think basically we've talked about so in the wrapper, you can have several different standards. You can say we're going to use the HR Open standard for the employment history. And we're maybe going to use IMS's for their competencies, or even the credential engine, and then maybe use PESC for the transcripts. So there's several different ways you can build it together. And the whole point that's really nice about this is it depends on what your need is. What's your business case? If you're only going to be doing transcripts, then use K through 12 A4L transcripts. If you're using university transcripts, use PES. If you only care about the CV information, you can use HR Open, or you can do a combination. And that's what's really nice about it.
And if I could just add one thing to what you're saying, Kim, is like in the community right now, I think there was a debate going on, which is, if we're going the direction of LERs, do we just create one standard to rule them all, a brand new standard? And I think where the community went, and what we tried to fight for in T3 with the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board and others, is to say, no, there's DSOs already out there doing the hard work, and their standards are bought in. And if we want to enable this infrastructure, if the name of the game is interoperability, we need to account for all the legacy infrastructure that's out there that's already using those standards. So the name of the game now is mapping standards to promote greater interoperability and then create new standards where there may be gaps. And that's how we've been pursuing it. But there's all these wonderful DSOs that are out there who already have widely adopted data standards, meet the field where it's at, and enhance their interoperability, and then bring in new standards as necessary. But I want to make sure folks understood kind of our strategic approach here, because we think that if we go back one slide and slide 4, we have a way then of accommodating a wide variety of different types of records that are focusing on different payloads that use different standards, and that's okay. But if we get if we get the wrapper and the wallet part right, we could begin integrating records in ways that we've not historically been able to do before.
And I think that mapping has been really crucial to that too, so that we can see where it was very interesting, because you think of a person name, everybody has person name in all the standards, but it was interesting on how different they could be. So, I mean, that's the simplest thing. So that was very interesting to go through that mapping process.
Kim, that's fantastic. And it's funny because I was just on a conversation in the xAPI Cohort Slack yesterday about person name standards just within xAPI and getting that right. And then, we're looking here at the complexity of the, standards of standards. And, Jason, I almost, as you were talking, I was thinking, and I'm gathering questions from the chat too, folks. So keep them coming. It's almost as though the LER is the middleware of standards. Is that a good way to describe? It kind of does that reconciliation, or is that going?
I think as far as a metaphor goes, it may work, but once you get to like the technical definition, it may not. It might fall apart. But I would defer to Kim to kind of find what's the right way of maybe constructing a metaphor out of this.
I'm sorry. I have to say, I was reading the chat. Can you repeat the question?
I was going the metaphor direction, Jason, but I was thinking the LER seems like the middleware of standards, right? So how do we get so that when it arrives in the learner's wallet, regardless of what language it comes into or what standard was used to come into, it operates in a cohesive way there?
Well, that might be something we want to actually ask Jim Goodell, because Jim, is that something? Jim Goodell was also involved in that, and I think he might be able to help a little bit more.
Okay. Well, we do have, in the meantime, we have some questions from the chat. So there was, well, let's go with the most recent. Martin just asked, right? So on your chart in slide 2, Kim, it seems that tracking the continued learning once you're employed is not part of that, and is that was intentionally out of scope, or just where are you looking at learning?
Okay, so we look at learning as not really in scope of HR as far as the learning management systems. Well, I don't want to say it's in scope, out of scope. Basically, we would say we will send information to learning management systems, but we do not come up with learning management software type standards because they're out there already. We don't want to duplicate standards that are out there. So basically, you may have an assessment, you might have some type of objectives that you have to learn from a performance plan that you've done, or succession planning that you want to do. And during those things, you're going to be collecting information on deficiencies, I'd say. So at that point, then you can go and say, all right, we're going to go to a learning management system. We're going to send that information of what is it we need to learn? How do we fill those gaps? And then that would come back into the HR area. So I hope that helped answer.
That does.
Yeah, if I could just add to Kim's remarks, I mean, Kim answered the right question the technical way. The one thing I just want to impress upon you from the Chamber's perspective is, as we kind of see the new economy that we're entering, companies have always been in the training business, but we're doubling down. And I think you're going to see a lot more investment, a lot more attention, and a lot more intentionality about how we're capturing that training as data that can empower a worker as part of their overall benefits. And we need to figure out what are the handoffs between the LMS systems and the HR systems. But at kind of a strategic level, companies are going to be in this game more and more, and we want to make sure we're not leaving any learning on the table. So we're going to be doing our part to work with our constituent and make sure they're outfitted with the right technologies and data standards to make sure all learning counts, including the vast amount of learning that's happening on the job that largely goes uncounted and unreported. And we want to clean that up. So a lot of folks ask about what could we do different? What can we do with what we have now? Because all this learning is not captured as data and linked to an individual in any way that can actually help them navigate their career, let alone reskill or upskill. So we're hoping to change that, and the data standards community is going to be vital. So it's not, something I like to tell my folks is, employers are going to become the new educators, but they're also going to become the new registrars. That's coming.
Ooh, okay. I like a good metaphor. That's one. Helen asked earlier on in the conversation, and it was directed at Jason. I think it's probably for both of you, and it has to do a little bit with what we've experienced in the learning space, right? So when we talk about friction in bringing these things forward, right? Are you seeing friction around people's understanding of the need for standards and shared data, or around the technology and actually making it happen?
Yeah, when I was using the word friction, it was mainly in a traditional sense of, look at all the points of friction when somebody applies for a job. All the things that can get in the way, add additional barriers or hurdles, or inadvertently get them weeded out. There's lots of potential points of friction depending on what use case you're looking at. And what we think is with greater and enhanced data interoperability, we could reduce that friction in ways that better connects people to education and jobs, and to employers to find talent. So it's all about removing that friction. For example, this might not be the best example, but I'm going to give it anyway. If an employer is like, hey, tell me about what you know and are able to do, Kim could probably speak to this example a little bit better than I can. An individual is going to go through the hiring process, the HR workflow process, but they're going to be submitting maybe a PDF or a Word document that has just unstructured data about them articulating what they know and able to do and what their history is. Maybe they're appending a college transcript, which tells you what courses they took. It tells me nothing about the competencies and skills they know and are able to do, let alone how they relate to the job. And just think of all the things that could go wrong in that process or just not go right. And we think if we are able to kind of remove some of the mystery of this through technology, we can actually make sure somebody knows they don't have to be put on the spot to say, within a couple pages, articulate everything you think you know, but how about we let your education experience speak for itself as data that's machine actionable, so you're not on the spot to try to summarize this on your own and communicate it out, but the data is working for you. And we think that's where we can start removing some of this friction, so we can start illuminating all the qualifications an individual has that often they're unable to communicate very effectively. And that's like a point of friction I was referring to. As far as the adoption of standards goes, at least from my point of view, as I've gotten in this business, and I've not been there very long when it comes to the data and technology side of it, I think there's a huge learning curve that still needs to happen about the role and value of data standards. And the thing of it is, they're not easy. And mapping them is not necessarily easy. It's also not rocket science, but it takes work, and it takes dedication, it takes commitment. And it's the hard work that needs to be done. And we got a great group of folks working together and doing it, and it's a labor of love, and we're going to keep doing it. But I think there is a huge learning curve out there, and we are committed on the business community side to making sure the private sector is educated about the role and value of these data standards and why they need to be procuring technologies that are using the right ones that's going to enable them to be interoperable with other systems. We're going to get there, but this is the long road, but we're committed to it. But Kim, please answer the question that you would like to.
No, I think that's actually really well, you responded quite well. As far as any other friction, I think you'd mentioned just, I think it's just the educating. I think that's really the big thing I've found over the many, many years is that, a lot of companies will say, well, we have our own proprietary information. We don't want to share that. we either, that build, buy, or, do we want to have one best of breed or the niche ones and put them all together? So there's a lot of challenges, I think, and it's kind of gone back and forth over the last 20 some years. So it might be, well, we bought one big, huge product and it did everything, or now we need to do, some of the smaller ones. And that's where we need to have the standards really involved, is saying, you want that best of breed. You want to say, I want background checks over here, and I want that product, and I want, assessments product over here, and an applicant tracking system over here. They all need to be able to talk. And so it's kind of a combination of being aware that if you use standards, you're going to be saving time. And I think that's that education piece.
Yeah. And if I could just build on this, I was at a table over at the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board at the White House, where we had a number of different companies and stakeholders around the table. And they were talking, then it was ILRs, interoperable learning records, and everyone wanted to rush to get some pilots out the door. This was over a year ago. And this question of data standards came up. And it was interesting and telling just how many folks around the table didn't really understand what they are, why they're necessary, or why we should be spending any time on them. And there was definitely a group of folks arguing, no, that's just going to add time and just a bunch of, let's just move past the data standards and do the fun stuff. Let's just build the product and test it. And we had to walk them back and say, look, if the name of the game is interoperability, you cannot skip this step. You skip this step, you're going to be coming back a year later realizing that you just built something that can exchange from one of your products to another one of your products, but can't exchange with anybody else in the ecosystem. And it's the hard foundational work that needs to be done, which is why in T3, that's where we started. It was about bringing the data standards organizations together, supporting them, getting them more membership, and giving them better mapping tools, and helping identify the priorities to make this infrastructure possible. And just one other example, we work very closely with another member of the T3 network, ACRA, which is the Association of University and College Registrars. And they've been leading this work for a long time. They've been pioneering CLRs, Comprehensive Learner Records, where they said, let's create a more comprehensive record of learning what's happening on our campus and through co-curricular activities. Really great stuff, 150 plus institutions doing it. But when they brought me into the conversations in the business community to learn about T3, it was to say, how do we make CLRs LERs? And the idea was there is, you've done really great innovation, but none of it's based on a data standard. And if you wanted to actually pass this record off to an employer or to another institution, you couldn't do it as data. What you could do is render it as a PDF and pass it along, and then I'm probably not going to open it as an employer, at least not at the time you need me to actually do something useful with it. So that's the value where they said, okay, we had to find a way to capture our learning better, but unless we move to a data standard and make it actionable across different IT platforms and vendor systems, we're never going to get to the vision we're all trying to aspire to. The data is not really working for the learner and the worker the way we envision it to. So we're hoping to build that, but again, the name of the game is data standards. We think that is the crux of making this interoperability possible, and we're committed in the long haul for the years to come to getting the data standards right and the data infrastructure right to allow the flow of LERs across all our domains.
Jason, it's like looking in the mirror, because but bigger, right? Because what we've been struggling with in the learning space is what you're struggling with in a much bigger space around convincing people to use a shared and interoperable standard and get the data. Yes, they can keep it in their own system, but use it across the system. So that's huge. Jess, got any questions before as we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, I have one. Because we have shared experiences, that's a good segue, Megan. How can folks who are already doing work with xAPI connect with folks who are using HR Open or LER to build better solutions together?
From HR Open. So one of the things I know, Jim Elder has the work group for assessments, and you guys are more than welcome to participate on that. Again, any of the work groups, if you guys want to follow up with me, you're welcome to help with as far as developing what those standards work with. And then I know Jason, you guys have a lot of pilots that you guys are working on.
Yeah, we just launched our Ler Resource Hub this past summer, and we are committed to it's going to be an iterative hub. We're always going to be improving it, adding more standards and open data tools and resources, more pilots, and it'd be great to get the 24 pilots that are already there and the dozens more that will follow working with the community that's working with xAPI. I think it's both and. You need both. And I think there's wonderful opportunities to make more rich, substantive pilot experiences that incorporate data standards as well as xAPI. And we can start doing the matchmaking and socialization within the context of that resource hub and community. So it's let's get folks networked right now. But in terms of kind of the grand vision, we are kind of concluding the second phase of the T3 Innovation Network, and we are committed to moving to a third phase, and we're planning it now. And we kind of have a loose brand of it right now called the T3 Network of Networks. Because what we see is if we are moving to an open, decentralized data infrastructure to promote global data interoperability, we need a neutral ground that's global, where different community groups could come together who are trying to solve these interoperability challenges, to have those technical governance discussions over who's solving what when, and how do we do it in a way that's ethical, that promotes equity, but enhances interoperability all the time. And we see different community groups forming around learning and employment records, different groups forming around the skills data infrastructure. We have the data standards organizations who deserve a consistent forum to come together and set priorities and map and harmonize data standards, and other groups. So we're trying to figure out, T3 doesn't want to stick around if the job's done, but is there a role it can play in this future world where it could provide a loosely federated governance structure for these different community groups to come together and work together to continue to solve for interoperability in this distributed environment? That's where we're going, and we want to get it right. And what I'm going to walk away from this conversation with is the idea that how do we get the xAPI community involved in that network of networks? Because the work you're doing deserves a seat at the table, and deserves to be informing and shaping this future interoperability.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason and Kim. I'm going to transition now into cohort updates, but thank you so much. That was very, very informative, and to see how interoperability affects different aspects of the employee experience. So thank you. I'm going to hop in for the teams that are giving up it. So I saw Brian, Jim, Sharon, Brian, are going to be giving updates today. Please activate your video and mic, and make sure that that is enabled so that we can give you mic access. And then I am going to pull up our GitHub in order to give these updates, although I know some teams do not have a GitHub. The good news is everybody who does have a GitHub has submitted their updates to GitHub, so that's very exciting this week. So first up, and I'm going, as always, I go in alphabetical order for who's submitting updates this week. So Team Adaptive Learning, I believe, is Sharon. So if Sharon, if your mic, I see you there. I can't hear you. Have you activated your mic, Sharon? It looks like it's unmuted. Oh, I hear you. Sharon?
Do you mean team storyline? I'm not adaptive learning.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, storyline engagement.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Sharon.
That's okay. We had a really couple of great weeks. My computer's been acting up, so my connection, so hopefully you guys can hear me. We met with Veracity this week, an LRS demo to the team, which was very, very lots of information. Some team members were actually, as they were going through the demo, actually doing some of the tasks and challenges that they had mentioned. And one of the interesting things that we learned is that they have is not your standard or robust LMS, but we're going to use that to upload our storyline file. So that was one of the additional bonuses or plus that we learned how to do with that particular LRS. So it was really great. And then some additional information that we learned. We could have talked for a while with all the information they provided. Matt provided yesterday to the team also a demo on how he used xAPI and the I can't talk now. Diversity LRS as well, which was really great and very encouraging to the rest of the team and help the team out as far as moving forward with developing our statements. He also shared out our storyline file to us for us to build on content and moving forward with our statements. As far as areas where the team may need support, team chat if there's anything that I'm missing. I can't think of anything. What we hope to accomplish by next week is to continue to build statements and share that as a team and learn from each other and continue to grow.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. Team Adaptive Learning is not here to give an update. And where they are, they're sending statements from both post types in WordPress and working on querying the LRS and populating the site with content this week. Team Down Under is also not here this week. And they did have an update. They have gotten a long press manual Mayday, and it will change color from red to green when there are fires. And you can click on the map and pop up a simulation window. So nothing's saving, but they do have, so you can send a manual Mayday and it'll change things on their tool that they're creating. Team ECE, I know Joanne is not able to give an update this week, but her update is that they're continuing to explore standards and activities and verbs related to nature play statements, and that they're working with Team Adaptive Learning in order to make that happen. They're going to reach out to individuals this week as needed, and they're needing help with continuing to work on the prototype in Twine to solidify the statements and test the new statements. We have Jim here today for Team HR Open Standards. So Jim, I'm going to pass it over to you. I see you're coming on the screen. Hi.
Yeah, hi Jess. Thank you.
No
what a great discussion. I would just, off of that, I just encourage everybody to get involved in data standards. It's really important. It's a lot of fun to be involved in work groups and standards. And our work group is finishing our use cases this week. We will do our final review on Friday, and we begin our the very first HR Open Standards xAPI profile. We'll be building that, working with Jason and Aaron next week. And it's just really exciting. Things are progressing very nicely, and we hope to have a first iteration for our profile ready by the end of the cohort. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. All right, Team Storyline, we already heard from Sharon. Team Zoom, I think I saw Brian was on the line for Team Zoom.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Brian, go ahead.
So we had another busy week, so we had to move normally our weekly meeting is on Wednesdays. So we're actually meeting after the call today to catch back up over the last couple of weeks. Matt has been doing some great work for us, put together our team's GitHub repo, and then also put together ADL statement viewer so that we can see some of the statements coming in and do any testing that we need. We still have a couple of things that we're hoping to accomplish in the last few weeks of the cohort. Really, we're taking a look at, today we're going to look at our code just so that everyone understands kind of what's going on in the background and how it all works. Make sure that everybody has their xAPI chops up to speed at this point. And then also taking a look at some of the more complex API data that we're hoping to get from Zoom to get some more complex information like how long people are talking on the call, whether or not they're sharing their screen, when they shared their screen, all of that kind of stuff. We have to work on parsing out that data to create those statements, but that's kind of next steps for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And then we have Team Pebble. And I don't know if Kristen or Judy is here. I didn't see them in the chat. So mostly they took the week off. Judy's still working on the Pebble book. Judy will keep working on the Pebble book. And they're releasing the alpha for testing. If you're interested in helping test, please let them know. Go ahead over to their Slack channel to do that. and help them test. And then our final update this week is Team Makey Making, and I saw Brian Duck had an update there.
Yes, I do. So Team Makey Makey, thanks for pulling that up. We have uploaded a video to YouTube, and in this video I'm working one-on-one with Martin Koob, and we discussed the HTML5 structure behind the Makey Makey application. This includes the HTML, CSS, JavaScript files, along with the needed JSON data structure and JavaScript libraries, including the ADL, xAPI wrapper, and Crypto.js. Now, although this sounds complicated and you do have to manage the interaction between the files, the ADL xAPI wrapper JavaScript library is a great place to start with xAPI. Once you configure your LRS account credentials and just edit 3 lines that are copied and pasted from another website, the xAPI wrapper will send xAPI statements from a web page. And part of the focus of the video is, what is that data structure? What do you need to edit? What do you need to change? So that's our update for this week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. All righty. So we are almost at the top of the hour. I want to remind you that we are here weekly at 2:00 p.m. in this Kaltura live room. We also release the recording via the weekly updates and in our resources chat channel in Slack. Next week, we're going to be exploring case studies with Wendy Morgan, and we have the party coming up, and you can do 2 things for the party. You can register as a participant and participate, or you can submit a call for proposals, and I'm going to pass it over to Megan to talk about that.
Yeah, so I know we have a lot of people in Cohort this time who are brand new to Cohort, which means you're also brand new to Party. And the 2 are separate events. Right? Cohort's your 12-week, you've been here, you're doing it. Jess is going to be needling you to share a demo of your work in the last 2 weeks. And you know, the thing about project-based learning, heads up all you instructional designers, right? Project-based learning means this is in the middle. We don't expect a finished product. In fact, we will probably learn more from your unfinished product and the things that you learned and that you share with us than if it were all like perfect, shiny, put a bow on it and everything worked perfectly. Especially amongst this community, right? We want to know what's under the hood. A few weeks after, on December 11th, we're going to have xAPI Party. And xAPI Party is, you can think of it as like the capstone event for the xAPI cohort. And it kind of is, but it's also a completely separate event that gets a lot of people who join who were not part of Cohort. So there's a definite Venn diagram, but it's not like a perfect circle kind of thing. What this means is that we have an opportunity to have, and we're doing Party a little bit different today. Project teams here in Cohort have an opportunity to share their demo and their story. They will have had a few weeks after Cohort ends before Party. We do that intentionally, so we have a few weeks to put a few more polishing bits around it. And your Cohort demo will be, what, Jess, 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Your Party, 15. Your Party, you get 45 minutes. And so you can really talk about all that you did and all that you learned. Your use case, your data, the whole 9 yards. And people really want to see this. By the way, if you are trying to emerge into the speaking scene, this is a great way to cut your chops on and share your case study here. So I will just put that out there. The xAPI Party then has Cohort projects, as well as other people in the space who are doing work with xAPI. And so there's education sessions, case study sessions, the whole 9 yards. We are going to do, if you've been to Party before, you know that we can't run it the way we usually run it, which is to have everybody into our office in Michigan, one set of the sessions happening virtually for people who can't be here. But we eat great food and we finish the day by drinking. We don't call it Party for nothing. However, it is a conference. And by the way, if any of your bosses need in order to get time for this, we have like a little stock thing that we send where we describe that the party is actually a conference and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, this year, though, we're going to take advantage of the fact that it's not happening at our office in Michigan and actually run it not only virtually, but globally. We are going to run around the clock, not a full 24 hours, but my vision is that we have a 15-hour event so that there's something happening at a convenient time zone or convenient time in every time zone. We've spiked 5 time zones to make this work: Mumbai, Australia, which I know Australia, you're 3 time zones, but we'll pick one. San Francisco, New York, and London. So we're going to work around the globe. Hats off to our friends down under who are going to do the overnight hosting work for us. And I put a link for the call for proposals in the chat. Please, 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 project teams, submit your project because the world wants to see them. And I happen to know the lady who's making the selections on what sessions get shown, so I'll put in a good word for you. Just kidding. All cohort projects get a free pass. You're automatically into the party. If you would like to submit a tutorial, an education session, a panel session, whatever, go ahead and submit it, and we'll be making selections as we go. There'll be probably some live sessions and some asynchronous sessions as well. Since we got the platform, we might as well use it. All right. Sorry, Jess, I talked way more than you anticipated me talking, so I'm going to stop now. Thank you.
You're very excited about the party. Yep. So I hope to see lots of proposals being submitted for party, and make sure you sign up to register. With that, we're right at the end of our week 9 web session, which means we'll be in week 10 next week. Wow. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email xAPIcohort@torrenslearning.com. That is our help desk, and they'll be back shortly. With that, have a great, great Thursday and keep making things. Bye.